In South Africa at the moment, there are actually more people on government grants than there are people actually working. They had all their training and ideological training in East Germany and the Soviet Union and places like that. So their view of what an economy looks like and what a society should look like is pretty much, what you saw in East Germany. Unfortunately, the best way to unify a nation is to create an enemy. And if the enemy looks different than you, it's a very easy way to create an us and them situation, unfortunately. And the reality is just that the violence has not stopped.
All right, welcome out to God and Country. My co-host Ingrid Bettridge is not able to be in today, but we're going to have a great conversation nonetheless. We have a great guest that's going to be with us from South Africa, and for obvious reasons, we are not going to be disclosing his name or his face because he has certain risks of retaliation from those that are around him and actual possible arrest for speech reasons. So, like what's going on in England, there's definitely a diminishing of freedom of speech within South Africa, and then there's a massive risk of just retaliation from just fellow citizens within that country. So, even though a lot of what we're going to discuss today isn't like scams or anything like that around the government, there is still a lot of evil that is happening within that country, and just simply disclosing or discussing it can get him into a lot of trouble. So we're going to call him Roy. So with the Christmas season coming up, one of my favorite movies is the movie Die Hard, and the officer in that goes by Roy because he doesn't want the terrorists within the Nakatomi Plaza to find out that his wife is in one of the hostages in that situation. So the officer John McClane goes by Roy. So we'll use that same terminology here and have our guest just be simply called Roy. So again, like, subscribe, and share the podcast. Again, YouTube does not like helping anything that is conservative, particularly political. So we completely depend on you as our audience. Share this information out there and get it out there as much as possible. So again, like, subscribe, hit that bell so you get notifications. These podcasts do go sometimes 2 to 3 hours. So if you need to listen to 20, 30 minutes a day, please do so, because we need listeners, not just subscribers. We still have Border Patrol as well as ICE coming up. Border Patrol was going to be on today, but they're having issues getting their flights and everything, getting the money flowing to get their flights from the shutdown. It was just kind of late, so they will be coming on, and probably within the next coming week or so. But today we're going to be discussing the atrocities that are going on in Africa, and particularly in South Africa. So I'd like to introduce everybody to Roy. Roy, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
As we know, there's a lot of wokeness going on throughout these other countries. It's getting pretty bad here in the United States, but more so throughout England, throughout Europe, South Africa. Now we're even seeing it up in Canada, where, it's just really, really sad to see what's going on in England, because over in England, they're just getting arrested for just talking. There's people getting arrested for silently praying a block, 2 blocks away from an abortion clinic. There's pastors getting tickets and arrested on street corners for just preaching. And so it's getting pretty bad. And what is not happening is anybody saying anything against Sharia law. So the Muslim religion is spreading. They're having an excessive amount of illegal immigration going in to England, and Sharia law is spreading. There's a lot of Sharia courts going on now. They're harassing women in the streets. And as we've pointed out in a couple of previous podcasts, the rape numbers have excelled exceedingly throughout England, throughout France, throughout Germany, going up in England by over 60,000, going up in Germany and France by 40,000. So it's getting pretty bad. Let's start off. So recently in South Africa, the news right now is that farmers are being persecuted and their land is literally being taken. So in South Africa, they've passed the law called the Expropriation Act, where they can essentially just kind of eminent domain, and what we would call it here in the United States, eminent domain, and just take your land. Now, here in the United States, they can only eminent domain when they're like having to build like a freeway or they have to expand a major road. They just can't take it for a housing development or commercial development. It has to be for a public service, which usually just means roads. And then they have to pay you fair market value for that land that they took. I mean, I had a property, 10 years ago, 15 years ago that I owned, where they're expanding a freeway and they ended up taking a couple acres of it so that they could expand the freeway. And they eminent domain that and just kind of paid me the market value for it. So I partially went through that. The issue is in Africa, or in South Africa, they're eminent domaining the property for free. It means they're just not paying you a dime. What's the situation there? What are people commenting about this new law that's going on?
Thank you. At the moment, there's a lot of controversy here, obviously, about it as well. Now, as far as I know, anyway, no land. I mean, it was even when South Africa's president was with President Trump in the Oval Office, one of the things that he used to defend the law was the fact that no land has been seized so far, right? But the problem is the law is not just about the land. The law actually defines any property that can be expropriated. It has not actually happened yet, but there is currently a court case on that they will definitely consider a type of a test case, where they are trying to seize someone's property, and it is and that court case is now going to come somewhere next year. And obviously people are challenging it in court, and hopefully they'll be able to challenge it according to the Constitution. So it's a controversial law. Even in South Africa, many people feel that it is against the Constitution and that it will not survive the scrutiny of the Constitution. But yeah, technically there is a law that says that they're allowed to seize property, any property, even, so technically they can even seize intellectual property or residential property if they want. So the law as it is formulated is dangerous. As I said, it is not necessarily something that's not actually happened yet, but there is a test case coming up, and depending on what happens, it can obviously be quite disastrous. You mentioned that land even in the United States can be expropriated for a public service. I'm not sure whether your law actually defines what the public service is. But the thing is, in South Africa, the law does not define exactly what this public service is. So obviously, if one is now a bit cynical, you can think to it, what is this public interest that you can seize the property for? It's obviously, what if it is some big shot politician whose granddaughter's cousin needs an office and your house will just be perfect, right? So it's so that's the kind of thing that people are afraid of. So many people are afraid of what it could lead to. But it is true, land has now not been expropriated yet as far as I know, but the law is out and it is dangerous. There is a test case coming out, and farmers are constantly threatened with land being taken, especially if there are elections. Then you find wild statements from politicians, including our current president, when he went on the campaign to say that, they want to take all the land, return it to, all the land of our ancestors must be returned, that kind of thing, which obviously means only one thing. And the woke media down here is now downplaying it and said, he just said it for the sake of the election and getting votes and things like that. But the point is, something like that has not been said. And now you have this law which gives sweeping powers to a lot of people, and they can do pretty scary things with it.
Well, the scary part about it is it's literally passed with zero compensation. I mean, they just go in and take it. So here in the United States, again, the law is very, very defined. Eminent domain is very, very defined, and it's usually can only be used for roads and freeways. I mean, they can't take it for some developer wants to build more houses. They can't take it for, in most portions, for like big commercial development or anything else like that. It has to be for the entire public, which is usually narrowed down to only the expansion of streets and roads that need to go somewhere, and that's the only place for it to go. But again, it's fair compensation. It's fair market value that they pay you for that. How do you think that past it they have zero compensation? I mean, like nothing.
The thing is, what they do is they apparently, I also don't know much more than what I read, and obviously I have family who are in farming, and they often discuss it. What are the kind of things that they are worried about? On the one hand, they are playing with words. Some people say it's not really expropriating without compensation. What's happening is that they do pay compensation, but legally the compensation can be nil, right? So it's so they're playing around with legal terminology to get it done and get it to happen. At this moment they are playing around with legal terminology to make it legal somehow.
Well, I feel that a lot of that just has to go back to the racism that has existed in Africa, South Africa, for a very long time. I mean, you guys went through the apartheid, and there was a big fight to have those freedoms for both the black population as well as the white population. And there's a large group of the white population that fought on behalf of the blacks and helped them get those freedoms. And there's a certain portion of the white population that were just evil and wanted to take away those freedoms from the black populations. But you got through the apartheid, but I think there's a lot of those feelings that are still there. Here in the United States, we're getting a lot of kind of black on white violence that is becoming excessive. And then there's a lot of talk about appropriations, and where they're going to go back and give money to the descendants of slaves because their fourth or fifth great grandparents were slaves. But the problem with that is the vast majority of the white population that are here were people that fought for those freedoms and to give them those freedoms, particularly on the Republican side, because it was the Democrat side that wanted slaves and voted against that, trying to do the what we call the Jim Crow laws. And then the Republicans are the party of freedom. Abraham Lincoln was Republican, and we've done a lot for those freedoms here. So what is the situation right now as far as this conflict, this racist conflict between black and white people going on right now in South Africa?
That's a difficult question because obviously a lot depends on a person's personal perspective, but the reality is that there are laws in this country that mention race by name. There are all sorts of regulations about what ownership of businesses must look like. There are quotas, what sports positions must look like when there's a competition and stuff like that. So there's a lot of race laws in this country, also in the schooling system, though, there is a certain narrative that's being pushed, and even in the, I suppose our version of the woke press, that the white people who are here today are the beneficiaries of apartheid, of apartheid, Now, one obviously cannot, I mean, that's now obviously someone's perspective, and whether you agree or disagree or not is now a different question. But the reality is that there's a very important element that has disappeared from the public discourse at some stage. The thing is, South Africa has now been democratic for a long time, right? Well, fairly long time. It's what, 30 years almost, or whatever. Can't make the calculation too quickly now. But the question is, who are the white people who are alive today? If you talk to school kids who study history as it is being taught in South African schools right now, the narrative being pushed is that, the whites are today are the baddies and stuff like that. They benefited from apartheid, and that's why they are doing better than everybody else. But the thing that has disappeared from the discourse is that who are the white people who are alive today? It is peoples whose parents and grandparents voted yes in the referendum of 1992. South Africa had its first democratic election in 1994, but before that, there was a referendum amongst the European population where they had to say, whether they feel apartheid should end. And obviously the yes vote won. So the people voted and said they want apartheid to end. The white people of the time voted, the majority voted, they want apartheid to end. And the white people who are in South Africa today are either themselves the ones who voted yes in 1992 and their children and their grandchildren. So for some reason, to my question is always, at what stage are people going to start saying that the white people who are alive today are the descendants of the people who voted yes in 1992? I mean, you have people who were born after 1994, after the democratic election, and the same almost punitive measures, against people in the name of redress or whatever beautiful politically correct term they use for it. It's happening against people who were not even born yet when all those things happened. And your channel is called God and Country, or I'm not sure, but what exactly is the channel called?
God and Country. Yep.
God and Country. So I suppose it's okay to reference the Bible. There's a section in the Old Testament where it says, if you are not guilty of your father's sin, and if you're a father, you're not guilty of your children's sin either. And there are big, very politically active churches, and you don't hear them preaching that at all. People have this idea of collective guilt, collective, measures that must be taken collectively against the white population to redress the injustices of the past, which is all fine. I mean, one can understand why people feel they want to do stuff like that. But my question is always just, at what stage does it end? There is, at what stage did they start saying, well, someone starts saying, the white people who are alive today are not the ones who were involved with the injustices of the past. They are mostly the children and grandchildren of the people who voted yes in 1992, yes, that apartheid should end. At what stage does that count for something? That's my question always. That's just my perspective, obviously.
Well, it's kind of my perspective as well. I mean, what's happening here in the United States is kind of along those similar lines, because there's a lot of push for what everybody is calling as white privilege. Like, you've had generations of privilege and the black population is suppressed. And I don't believe any of that to be true. What is true is there's certain elements in power on the left that want to create victims. And the more victimization they can push, the more they can push problem, more they can push segregation in a problem between the races, whether it's actually between the races or between gender, because there's a lot of this victimization amongst the LGBTQ community. There's a lot of it amongst the Muslim community, where the left wants to purposely create victimization, because through that they have control. And it's not about reparations. It's not that there is actually racism, because I don't believe that there is racism in my generation or in my children's generation. or even mostly in my parents' generation. It could have existed a little bit before that. I mean, obviously there was the issues back in the 60s, the 50s and 40s of pretty deep racism going on within this country. But in our generation, I don't see any of my children or most people in my generation that even see color anymore. Nobody cares. It's really gone to what Martin Luther King has said, which is just, what's your character like? Are you God-fearing? Are you a good moral person? Or do you want socialism, communism, or something else? And it really comes down to character. But the left can't control people with that. And in order for them to stay in power, in order for people like even within your country to stay in power, they have to have victims, they have to have a problem, and they have to foment that problem and then never solve the problem. Because as long as the problem exists, as long as there's that animosity between the races or between the genders, they can go out there and say, vote for me because I'm going to fix the problem. Vote for me because I'm not the racist baddie. I'm not the bigoted person. We're going to fix all that, or we're going to get you reparations, or we're going to, whatever it is that they're promising that they're going to do on their election campaigns. And that's how they stay in power. The other part of that is, particularly here in the United States, is large problems with government assistance programs. And so they purposely get the minorities, the black population, the Latin population, stuck on government assistance programs. And then that becomes generational, where there's generations of just absolute dependence on the government. And then that creates a permanent voter for the woke left. And
in South Africa at the moment,
that's how they stay in power.
People, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, in South Africa at the moment, there are actually more people on government grants than there are people actually working. So yeah, it's a very, very big reality over here as well. And it does get said in election campaigns, when it's election time here, then they try to get people to vote for the current government again by saying that if this new party comes in, they are going to take away the grants, which is a very powerful weapon if you are in a situation where there is no real prospect of employment for a lot of people. Unfortunately, that's the reality down here, and what must one do to solve it is I'm not an economist, so I don't know what the ultimate solution would be. But yeah, you have too many people. You have more people on social grants in this country right now than you have people actually working, and it's obviously just not sustainable.
Well, there's no way that could possibly be sustainable. And there's a lot of people in our country trying to push socialism. Let's just take from the rich and give it to the poor. Doesn't matter if they've earned it or not, just give it to me. And you get this entitlement attitude where people just want more and more and more and more. And then the more the politicians promise, the more the politicians will take from the wealthy, take from others, and just essentially just redistribute the wealth. But like you're just saying, eventually there's going to come a point where there's not enough people working. So where are they going to continue to take the money from? And then the economy just gets lower and lower and lower and lower. And then the quality of life, the standard of living just gets lower and lower and lower because it just kills the entire economy. And the country as a whole becomes poorer and poorer because nobody's working. The only way to fix that is to have capitalism. It's to give people a sense of self-esteem, a sense of self-worth, and you have entrepreneurship where people go out and they create business, they create work, they create jobs. And it doesn't matter what race you are because none of that matters. It's just people that have an idea, have a work ethic, and they go out and they see an issue, they see a problem, and they solve a problem. They create a job around that, and they start performing a product or a service for their fellow countrymen and generate income from it or generate jobs from it. And if you don't have the systems in place within the government to push that entrepreneurialism and to let people earn what they're worth and let people have that benefit, then it's not going to happen. The more you take from people, the more you tax them, the more you redistribute wealth, the less incentive people have to be entrepreneurs, the less incentive they have to go out there and work and be good workers. And that's the issue. That's what kills economies, is when you start redistributing wealth, people just stop working. And they figure that, well, I can just vote in more socialistic programs, more government assistance, but eventually the wealthy move out, the businesses move out or get crushed or go out of business, and there's nobody else left to redistribute wealth from.
At the moment, there's frequently all sorts of reports, how many businesses are closing. And not too long ago, there was the most ironic statement from some big shot politician that, they are so happy this year or this quarter, only so many business closed, not more. And then you wonder, what's going on. And what some people actually don't appreciate is, one must realize the current government in South Africa is at the same time, if I say current government, I mean the largest political party. I mean, the largest political party has now theoretically lost the election, and they're now governing by means of a coalition. But the biggest political party, the party effectively running the government, is at the same time the previous liberation movement. And what people fail to appreciate is that those guys were funded by, that they had all their training and ideological training in East Germany and the Soviet Union and places like that. So their view of what an economy looks like and what a society should look like is pretty much, what you saw in East Germany and those places. And sometimes when I hear what some of the things that they say and policies they're trying to create and laws they're trying to pass, I can't often help wondering, they're just trying to recycle, East German and Soviet policies, which didn't work back then either. So in this country, the state wants to control everything, and often during elections they will promise to create jobs, but create jobs means that the state will employ more people, right? So that's the problem with that kind of election promise. But
well, the government doesn't make money. The government consumes money. The government doesn't create business. It doesn't create the economy, and that's what people really fail to see. Is just because I go work for the government, the government doesn't have this endless pocket of funds that just is going to be there all the time, ongoing forever. Those funds have to come from somewhere, and it comes from the people. And if the people are not incentivized to work, if they're just incentivized to vote in more free stuff, those businesses disappear. We did a podcast a couple weeks ago on what is happening in Chicago and what is going to be currently happening within New York City, because we have a socialist Muslim that just got elected as mayor within New York. And both those cities, Chicago and New York, have brought in a lot of these socialistic mindset and tendencies and policies that they're putting into place. Now, if you go down to downtown Chicago, there's a lot of buildings and offices that are now just boarded up for lease, for rent, and just nobody's moving in because all those businesses have moved out. The wealthy have moved out the suburbs or moved out of state. And the same thing is going to happen in New York now that Mamdani's in there, because he's promising all this free stuff to the people, and he's got to take those funds from somewhere. Now, with our discussion with South Africa, I mean, you're farther along in that process where a lot of those businesses have already left, and it's already apparent that socialism is not working. So as they take this mindset from East Germany and Russia, as you say, which is socialism, and in Russia, obviously communism, you can see how destructive that is. So in the last, let's say, 10, 20 years, how have you seen the economy affected by those policies? I mean, the diminishing of the economy, the strength of the economy, what have you seen as those tendencies have kind of infiltrated into the government? Hey, this is Uriah Kennedy with the God and Country podcast. And one of the main reasons why I live in the Rocky Mountains in Utah is because there is nothing I enjoy more like getting out in the great outdoors. I absolutely love getting out there and camping, hiking, fishing, everything with my family. We do that every single year. Throughout the winter months, we're up there snowmobiling. The summer months, we're out there RVing or ATVing. We absolutely love it. It's the best time of the year we have together as a family. There's nothing like getting out there with the proper equipment. And we all know and trust Coleman since we were kids. Our parents, our grandparents have used Coleman for generations. They have the best tents, sleeping bags, coolers, cooking materials, and anything else you can possibly think of that you might need while you're out there enjoying the great outdoors. Please support our channel by going to the link in our description or scanning the QR code that's popping up on your screen and going to Coleman to buy all these needs. Whatever it is you can possibly think of, again, from stoves, tents, sleeping bags, coolers, any type of camping utensils, cooking utensils, fuel, whatever it is you can possibly need, click on the link in our description or the QR code that's popping up on your screen. Support the channel by buying any of this outdoor equipment at Coleman. We love the wide variety of products that Coleman has made over the years and how trustworthy those products have been. Coleman has a world-renowned name, something we've grown up trusting, and if you can think of it, they probably have it. So again, click on the link in our description or scan the QR code popping up your screen. Support this channel and keep watching.
The thing is, you have a lot of government control. There's an article I read quite a long time ago that, the ideals of the current regime is communist. So they would have hoped that, they could own the economy somehow. But now when it becomes apparent that they can't own the economy, they want to control the economy. So there's really a lot of legislation, a lot of regulation. I sometimes feel, there's a few things in the country that's not government regulated somehow. And obviously it causes that people feel quite, people feel it's very difficult to do business, and that's one of the things why many people feel that's why new businesses are not opening, and people are hesitant to invest. Sometimes the politicians here make all these promises about what they're going to do to create new jobs, and then they list or rather, they promise how they're going to create new jobs, and then they tell what they're going to do, and then they list everything that's going to destroy jobs. So the problem is that I don't think they understand really how a modern economy works. A very respected economist in this country wrote an article recently where he said the problem is the current government is stuck in an outdated world view. If you think about it, when did Karl Marx write his great books? When did Vladimir Lenin say the things that he did? It was a time when the world looked very differently than it did now. And what's frightening is that whenever you have a communist leader delivering a speech, they quote from Lenin and people from that, they quote from Lenin as if it is a valid resource to quote from. I realize that it's probably valid to them, but unfortunately it is a symptom of how stuck they are in a world that does not exist anymore.
And it's shocking how many people here in the United States think socialism is a solution. Anytime they start going through financial hardships or the economy gives them problems, they say, well, let's just do more of it instead of less of it. They purposely paint capitalism as that's the problem. The people on the right, the conservatives, they're the problem. And that's exactly what socialists and communists do. If you go back to Hitler during Germany, he created a socialistic government, and he started taking from the wealthy, taking from the Jews, and increasing the size of his government to where it was that single-party state, absolute control. And that's what they want to do here in the United States. That's obviously what they're trying to do down there in South Africa. The main party is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the other parties are just almost non-existent at this point. And once you move into that single party state that where they have absolute control, that's where the country almost gets absolutely destroyed, because they will put in policies in place that completely suppress the people, completely suppress the economy, and there's no growth. But as the people see more and more problems where I'm not surviving, I don't have enough food on my plate, they want to point to the government and say, no, you as a government, you created this mess, you're the problem. And so the government, in order to stay in power and not have all that blame put on their shoulders, they deflect, which is exactly what is happening here in the United States, is where the left is deflecting or projecting all the problems onto the right, saying, hey, they're the source of this problem, and they blame the right for exactly what they themselves are doing. They just project it.
Yes.
And
And
then
the thing is, unfortunately, the best way to unify a nation is to create an enemy. And if the enemy looks different than you, it's a very easy way to create an us and them situation, unfortunately. And it's quite successful over here.
well, that's exactly what Hitler did. So going back to Hitler, so he created this socialist environment. He started taking from the people. The people are seeing that they're getting poorer and poorer. The country's not surviving. And they already had massive problems because of the reparations from World War I. And then the first thing Hitler does is created a place or a group of people to point the blame, to point the fury, to point the anger. And he pointed that at the Jewish population. Right now here in the United States, they're getting, again, pointed at the Jewish population. They're getting pointed at just white people in general, saying, hey, you're the problem. You have white supremacy. You guys have created these issues. Or they're pointing it at Christians and saying, hey, Christians are the problem. We need to get rid of Christianity and just have other religions or no religions at all, or the Muslim religion that's moving in droves. Anything but themselves becomes the problem. And we saw that during the days of Hitler, where the Jews were slaughtered in the millions. And now we're starting to see the same issues in South Africa, where the blame is now being put on the whites. And the problem with that is people do not see, throughout this world, people do not see as white as victims. You're the superior race. For some reason, that's how people want to paint whites. And so all of a sudden, people are looking at whites just like Hitler looked at them and saying, no, you're the superior race. You don't have any victimization. You're the ones that have created this problem. It's your parents and grandparents that created this problem, and you guys need to pay the price for it. And I don't know how that survives. I don't know how that segregation and that animosity creates an economy, because it won't. It completely divides everybody. It's going to create a civil war type of mentality where people just want to attack each other. And then we're seeing a lot of that here in the United States when Trump tries to go out and get illegal immigrants to deport them. People are looking at the ICE officers and, again, at white people and just dehumanizing them. They become less and less of a human, and it literally gives permission to other groups to attack them, to throw Molotov cocktails at them, to rocks at them, and even shoot and kill them, which is what we're starting to see here in the United States, which is very, very scary. But you're already starting to see that, where the white population down there is getting so dehumanized that it's almost becoming a regular thing to have literally have violence in the street against that group of people. The whites are the minority in South Africa by massive numbers.
And look, that's also difficult because obviously, many people ask, how are things down here? And that's difficult. A lot depends on personal perspective. I mean, maybe I'm reckless, but obviously crime is out of control in this country, and that is why you are scared of being on the street, but not necessarily because you're scared of another person that might attack you because of your race. But it is a reality that, if you are white of European descent, you are considered the bad guy by in the public.
association.
In the public rhetoric, you are the bad guy, and unfortunately, one does not find that white people are being attacked necessarily, but you definitely get the feeling the table is being prepared for something, because it is so, that there is public rhetoric. There are people chanting all sorts of very destructive and threatening things, and a person does get a bit scared. What is going to happen in the end? Where will it all end? And this thing about farmers being attacked, there's an organization here, a civil rights organization, that tried to rise up for the case of farmers, and not just European, but any minority group. And yeah, they basically trace something back to the idea that, during the liberation struggle, there was an element of trying to, scare farmers off their land by means of the violence and things like that. And the reality is just that the violence has not stopped. And whenever farmers do try to call upon the government to help, or try to get them to protect them more, or something like that, then unfortunately the government feels the government will usually downplay the problem, and that's the kind of thing that causes the perspective amongst the white population to grow, the perception amongst the white population to grow that the government does not want to help. So there's a lot of perspectives, and a person must now ask, perception is also reality for many people. But the reality is that farmers are being attacked on their land, and the police is not able to stop it. Farmers who are being attacked feel that they are being attacked because of their race, not just for economic reasons. The public discourse amongst the police says that it's a violent crime like any other. I mean, South Africa is a very violent country, unfortunately. The crime is really, really bad, and many people feel that you cannot then prioritize farm attacks for that reason. But I'm afraid the perception amongst farmers especially is that they are being targeted, not just for economic reasons, but because of their race.
Well, how did that start? How did farmers get alienated and attacked in the beginning? What started that movement?
That's also difficult to say. Look, the problem is the Afrikaans word for a farmer is boer, right? And now there's a song being chanted by a very prominent politician down here, kill the boer, kill the farmer. And unfortunately in Afrikaans, the word boer for many people is the equivalent of a white Afrikaner. So it is not necessarily really the truth, but I mean, it is so. If you talk about a boer, then you don't just talk about somebody who is farming. You talk about white people in general. The animosity there, it does start from the liberation movement. During the liberation struggle, people tried to scare farmers off the land by means of the violence directed against them, and the violence just didn't really stop.
Well, it seems kind of counterintuitive. The very people that are out there creating the food that feeds you, they're the ones that are getting scared off. So is it where the government or others just want to take over the farmland, or they think that the farmers are overpricing their food or something like that? What do you think is creating that?
It's ideology. In the conversation that I've now had with some people, they will tell you, if you tell them, but look, the farmers produce the food. If you chase them off the land, people will have no food, and farming will collapse, economy will collapse. Then you ask them, why are you so adamant of taking the farms and things like that? And then they will basically tell you, but that's not the point. The point is not whether there's enough food. The point is not whether the economy is okay or not. Take the land, the economy will collapse, but it will get better over time. It's the principle. Who does the land belong to? So unfortunately, it is about ideology more than practical considerations. Ideologically, a lot of these things are ideologically motivated.
So it's about the land in the end. They don't believe that white people should own any land, that it should just be given back to the black population. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and look, and the question is also that phrase, give it back. Where does that phrase, give it back, come from? Because obviously the question is, there was actually some other land act in the beginning of the 20th century, where it is so, where black people were expropriated of their own land. And now there was talk recently. I mean, obviously, what happens in the press and what happens in real life and in legislation are not necessarily the same, but obviously, it creates a perception that is scary. That they say they don't want to focus only on land that was expropriated back then. They want to take it all the way back from when the first Europeans set foot here. So unfortunately, give it back. Give it back to whom? I mean, the whole narrative that the land has been taken, has been stolen, and should be given back. And if there's violence, people are just getting what's coming to them, type of thing. So unfortunately, that's the perception in the public space, and that conversation is being very carefully managed and driven in a certain direction. And what is the truth is unfortunately open for a person's perspective.
Well,
I suppose it goes both ways as well.
They're really, really trying to push that narrative here in the United States. I mean, they're putting their full effort into it, as the land was stolen from the Native Americans. The black population was forced into this country. They need to have reparations for the natives. They need to have reparations for the blacks. Everything is going down those lines. And then you're saying, well, how far back do we want to go with these reparations? I mean, who deserves what? Is it just the people that have ancestors that had slave ownership, or what do you do with the ancestors that fought for those freedoms? And it's a fool's errand. It's a full story to think that that's even conceivable to just give stuff back that where 5, 6, 7, 8 generations have gone by. When a country is created, it's particularly the United States, where you just have people moving in from all over the world, you're trying to put together all these different moral standards, all these different philosophies of how things go. It takes generations for that to mesh, which is what's happened here in the United States. And the same things happened in South Africa, as you had a lot of Europeans moving into South Africa. You have the natives there, and it takes a long time for things to mesh. Now, here in the United States, things have meshed a little bit faster, and laws have gotten in place fixing the slavery problems, fixing a lot of the inappropriate ways that people handled other races. But again, by the time it gets to like my generation, even part of my parents' generation, my kids' generation, for sure, it just doesn't exist anymore. That racism is just not there anymore. Nobody cares anymore. Nobody looks at that anymore. It's just a figment of people's imagination now. But they want to keep that in the mind's eye. They want to keep that in the public domain to create the victimization, to create the problem, because all they care about in the end is staying in power and figuring out how to keep the power that they have and vote in more power.
Because the thing is, if you talk to kids at the moment down here, there is an apparent color blindness between kids. The real problem is not even really maybe what's happening on the streets or between the average person. It's unfortunately the government policy being pushed from above. If you talk to an average person, I mean, maybe I am naive, but if you talk to an average person, the average person does not think that racism is really the biggest problem. The average person really just wants a job and take care of his family, and most people just want to get along. But the government unfortunately drives certain ideologically driven policies, and also it's a certain ideological view of history, and history is being employed in a way to paint a certain group as the baddies. There was a while back, there was quite a few press, in the press, people saying, you are the beneficiary of colonialism. And then people forget, history has a way of panning out in a very random way. If you come down here, corn, right? Corn, it's a very common crop down here. Many people have it in their traditional food down here. But the question is, where does corn come from? Corn does not come from this continent. It was brought here by someone. But for some reason, I'm not saying that one must now not relativize colonialism and things like that, but it is because of the way history has run that you find that corn now currently is the staple food of many people down here, even though it's not indigenous to this area. How did it get here? And then somebody wrote, obviously in a joking way, it was a public spat between someone of European descent and someone of African descent, where the African person accused the white person and said, okay, you are the beneficiary of colonialism. And the person responded and said, do you eat maize? Do you eat cornmeal? Where did it come from? It came from South America, brought most likely by slave traders from wherever. So you are also a beneficiary of colonialism, I mean, whether that's not historically true is a different question. But the reality is just there is an ideological narrative about history, and it is used in such a way to make a certain group guilty of something in the minds of others, and that is supposed to paint how people should be treated at the moment. But once again, it is on the level of official government policy. It's not necessarily the feeling on the street. I mean, it's not necessarily the feeling on the street, but one is quite scared about what is happening from the field of legislation and things like that. So yeah, I'm very anxiously looking at what happens with this court case that's hopefully going to come forward next year.
Well, that's exactly what the problem is again, on the street, it's the same thing here, is people just not seeing that racism. But what they are seeing is this new victim mentality where everybody has been victimized. You're the sufferers for somebody else caused this to you, or the reason why you're poor is because someone else did this to you. The reason you can't get up and become more successful is because somebody else did this to you. Then people actually start believing it because it's repeated to them over and over and over again, where they actually honestly believe it. And there's a lot of podcasters, there's a lot of people out in the streets doing interviews where people honestly believe that they're the victim of some great conspiracy out there from the white population or from their ancestors or whatever it is, and they can't get past that. And that's exactly what the left wants to create, is that victim mentality, that dependence on the government, because that keeps them in power. Whereas here on the right, what we want to do is lift people up, teach people how to fish, and not just give them a fish, and help them have the self-esteem, the self-worth to be able to just get past any of these narratives and become a very, very successful person in society. And most people are doing that and trying to do that, but there's more and more and more of this victimization, more of this attitude where you owe me, just give it to me, just take it from the rich and just give it to me. And
the victimization, unfortunately, causes that people don't see the reality, because if you read the public, the media, many problems are considered to be the fault of the way history, from history, but the corruption of people today, for some reason, does not count against them. Somebody said the other day, also I can't remember where I read it, that some people are being blamed for things that happened when they were not even born yet. But politicians today are not being held responsible for the crimes that they themselves commit, which does influence the people of today. Personally, I believe a lot of the poverty and misery in the country is because of the aid and the help that there is not being channeled in the right way. It lands in very powerful people's pockets, and then when people suffer economically, then it is very often to point to someone and say, okay, but that's your problem, that's your enemy. So unfortunately, it is.
Well,
It
when
is
people
the
become
reality at the moment.
entitled and like they're old, they get that victim mentality and become entitled, they are depressed. It's literally where they are controlled. And I don't even think that they even see themselves as being depressed or controlled, but that's exactly what is happening. It's like being pushed down into a trench during the middle of a war, and all you can see is the trench. You're not seeing the entire battlefield like the general is up on the hill. And this victim mentality and this dependence on the government, where you feel like that the whole world owes you everything and it just needs to give it to you, really depresses you. And people just don't see that, don't understand that. I'm not being depressed. I'm not being controlled. When you are, those that get up on their own 2 feet and just get out and work, create a good work ethic, create a good self-esteem, they get out of that victimization, they get out of that poor me attitude, and they find that they can be very, very successful in life. The economy grows from it. Families in particular grow from that, because the first thing that gets destroyed because of that victim mentality, because of that poor me attitude, is the family. The family gets constantly attacked, and then it just disintegrates that family. You have a lot of homes are raised without fathers. You have that increase in crime because children are just not being taught. And it all stems from this victim mentality, from this poor me type of attitude, and that people just don't grow out of, because it just passes from generation to generation, and it's very, very difficult to overcome. Very difficult to overcome.
And the thing is also the, once again, education system. I can't remember what the exact percentage is, but it's a frightening percentage of children, primary school age children and even high school children who cannot read for basic information, and also a frightful percentage of fatherless homes in this country too. And obviously it causes often that, who do people really listen to? They listen to the person who sings the loudest, shouts the loudest. People do not think critically or read critically for themselves that all these things we hear in the public domain, is it really true? Is there another side to it? And that is what many people have the inability to do. I think down here, especially young people.
Well, what are you seeing as far as the divide between Christians and non-Christian? What do you see as far as the influx of Muslims into South Africa? How is that going right now?
Look, if one talks about an influx, that obviously is a very tricky topic as well. I'm simply not very well versed in that topic at all. But what I do see is just that, you do find, extremism as well, not necessarily religious violence, but, if you drive around Johannesburg, you find that there are, banners across highways saying things like "Stop Apartheid," "Stop Apartheid," Israel, and "Free Palestine," and the Palestinian flag is draped against mosques, some mosques, and things like that. So you definitely have a feeling of people, closing ranks against each other. But I don't think we have an influx of necessarily immigrants, Muslim immigrants, the way you guys might have, or the way they might have in Europe. But unfortunately, xenophobia, violence against foreigners and perceptions of foreigners is very, very rife here.
Well, there's a lot of news going on in other countries within Africa itself about extreme violence against Christians, where Christians are literally just running for their lives because they're just being shot and killed by the hundreds. Are you seeing a lot of news about that in your country? Is that violence spreading? Do you think that's going to eventually make its way to South Africa?
The fear that people have is just that our borders are not very secure. So you often hear about, some of these terrorist organizations that are active in Nigeria that somehow, there's always a rumor of a group being active in South Africa as well, or the possibility of, them finding a safe haven here somehow. Because one of the problems is that one of the organizations that do commit extremist actions are in Mozambique, which is one of our neighboring countries. So literally we have that kind of thing on our border, and many people feel. I mean, whether it's not true is a different question, but many people feel that our borders are not secure. People like that can just come in, and people are worried about it.
Do you see anything with Boko Haram or anything like that moving in, or other type of terrorist organizations?
There's always often there are rumors of people like that, yeah. So, but obviously nobody pinpoints anything or says something straight. So, but yeah, Boko Haram, it is a most definite topic of discussion, and people are very worried. They feel that if people like that should ever come in, the people in control don't have the ability to combat it. That's the perception anyway.
So let's go back to just kind of crime rates in South Africa. So I pulled up a couple of articles here. So this I pulled up from literally the U.S. Department of State here in the United States. And they just kind of give a summary of what's going on human rights-wise down there in South Africa. Disappearance and abductions.
Oh, yes. No, that is very, very true.
Yeah, so where people are just disappearing. During the year, there were numerous cases of arbitrary arrests, particularly of foreign workers, asylum seekers and refugees. NGOs and media outlets reported security force arbitrarily arrested irregular migrants and asylum seekers, including those with proper documentation. And it goes down to even some others within the country themselves, particularly in the conservative media, that are just disappearing and being abducted, and no one ever sees or hears from them ever again.
Yeah, the thing is, it is look, about kidnappings and abductions is it's difficult to pinpoint the origin of that. Crime definitely plays a role, because you often hear about people being kidnapped and then they're being released on ransom, and then it's not necessarily a huge amount. So I mean, look, huge amount is now also relative, but people are being kidnapped, wealthy businessmen and things like that. And once again, the police just often doesn't seem to be able to prevent it. But the about arbitrary arrests and things like that, I don't know anything. But what is happening here right now is that there are a few scandals about some very high-ranking officials in the police who are involved in crime, and very frightening accusations. And obviously there's now a commission of inquiries that is now supposed to investigate. But the problem in this country is that commissions of inquiries don't necessarily lead to arrests and justice being served necessarily. So unfortunately, many people feel this is not just yet another elaborate process, and in the end, nothing might come of it. So it is quite frightening. The police, often you wonder, you're not sure if they don't want to help or can't help. And obviously one cannot make a blanket statement like that about everybody. I mean, a very good friend of mine is a police officer, and he really, you can see, tries his best. But the problem is just there is just corruption that has unfortunately crawled into the police services as well. And right now there are some frightening accusations about who was involved in what, and then it's quite important people. And also the police's inability to protect people. There's now been lawyers being assassinated and things like that. You hear a lot about political assassinations in the country at the moment. And it's all just things that the police cannot prevent. And I just think personally they are maybe not equipped to do it, or not trained to do it. Some accusations are that they are sometimes involved in it. but one is not entirely sure what to think of it. But yeah, those things are happening, and one is not sure what to think of it always.
Well, there's could be two parts of that, right? It could be just gangs or groups that are kidnapping people for the money, just holding people ransom. But the scarier part of that would be where acts are actually being created or happened by the government themselves, where they're just trying to hush political opponents or anybody that might speak up against them. And with these inquiries happen, or these commissions happening, where nothing eventually happens, you're wondering, well, how high does it go? What superiors are also involved that are just squashing this or not letting information come out? Does this go all the way to the top, yes or no? And what is really being hushed? You mentioned that there are attorneys that are being assassinated and others being assassinated there within the country. Are there comments of how high the corruption, how high the crime goes, and if it's really high officials squashing things that they don't want out in public?
Well, apparently our state president was caught with a large amount of money hidden in a sofa. So you find that yeah, there's lots of conspiracy theories about how high it goes. But these latest scandals that are now coming out, very high-ranking police officials and previous government ministers being implicated in some of the accusations, and also whistleblowers, right? If somebody comes out in public to announce that there is some illegal stuff happening, and very important people are implicated, that's the kind of people who often get assassinated before they can testify in court and things like that. All these things do create the impression that it goes very, very, very high up. But unfortunately, one never really knows, because you don't ever see anybody being, well, you don't see very important people being convicted and arrested, So anyway.
Well, that's the fear, right? Is nothing's happening. And well, the fact that the message is getting out that there is corruption in place. Someone has got to be divulging that message that there's corruption in place. There's got to be whistleblowers. There's got to be other government officials saying, no, that there is quite a bit of corruption. So somehow there are good people there that are trying to get the message out, but they're being hushed. Or like you're saying, they just disappear. So this is Uriah Kennedy from God and Country, and I've been fishing since I was a little kid. My father used to take me out there and teach me how to tie the knots to get my lure on the end of that line, and then cast it into the stream or in the local lake that we were fishing at. There are very few things in this world that are more relaxing and more fun than getting out on the water and pulling in a big fish. In order to have that type of success that you want, to be able to get out there with your kids and be able to have them have that success, or not get skunked yourself, you have to have the best equipment. We all have known and trusted Rapala from the time we were little kids. Rapala has the best lures and the best equipment that you could possibly buy. Trust Rapala in all these needs, and go to Rapala by using the link that is on our description, our QR code that's going to be popping up on your screen. Again, you must use the link in our description or the QR code that's popping up on your screen. Trust Rapala for these fishing needs. Again, any type of lures, tools, knives, clothing, and apparel that you will need, you can go to Rapala and get those needs taken care of. Enjoy the water and enjoy being out there with your kids, and be successful at the same time, because there's nothing like getting skunked, but there's nothing more joyous than pulling in that big fish. So trust Rapala for those fishing needs, and go to Rapala right now using the link in the description, the QR code that's popping up on your screen, and thank you for supporting our channel. Is there a sense within the community, within the voter bloc, that there are good people with the government? Do they know who's who, or more people just afraid to just come out and say anything because people are disappearing?
I think people are scared. I mean, from personal experience, I know that there is from personal experience, I know someone who is he's like an accountant or something, forensic accountant somewhere, and he actually needs to go into hiding because his life is in danger from the people he's finding out, and who will most likely be implicated by what he's doing. And so yeah, you have somebody who is investigating possible financial trouble, illegal financial things, which will implicate very important people, and he needs to go into hiding. So I actually know someone like that. So yes.
Yeah, definitely a fear. So obviously have your face blacked out, so there's some fear from your end too. So if this podcast if we were not blacking out your face and people knew that you were doing this podcast, what would you think would happen to you? I mean, what do you think your fears would be there?
Well, we have our own version of cancel culture, and unfortunately, with many affirmative action type laws here, it's already difficult for someone of my profile to find work and things like that. I can only imagine it would be worse if somebody realizes who I am. Hope and pray nobody recognizes my voice if they don't recognize my face. And so one is worried, but I do feel there is a message that's definitely not going out, and I feel and I just hope that I can contribute somehow to bring awareness. Yeah, that's my hope.
Would you have any fear of being arrested by the government or any type of government pushback, or is it just from others within the community that would try to cancel you out?
I think more others in the community. Yeah.
So this one is from the Human Rights Watch there, and this events were from 2023 and a little bit into 2024. But one of the things they mention here is particularly is violence against women. So violence against women and girls is widespread, endemic, and enduring nightmare in South Africa. The World Population Review for 2023 ranked South Africa among the top 6 countries with the highest femicide rates worldwide. Official crime statistics reveal that between April and June 2023, the police recorded 6,228 counts of murder, averaging 68 murders per day, which is crazy. Of those killed, 1,188 were women and children, including boys. In the sexual offenses category, an alarming 9,252 cases of rape were reported countrywide during the same period, so from April to June. So you're talking April, May, June. So within 3 months, 90 days, 9,252 cases of rape reported in the country. And those are just the ones reported, because obviously there's a lot that go unreported. Many women and girls, especially in the rural areas, find it difficult to access the justice system. So, like you're saying, the police, the courts, nothing's happening. So,
it's difficult because if you walk into a police station and often you do come across police officers that you can see they're really, really trying to help, but they themselves are being handicapped to do it. Or they are under-resourced, or whatever the case may be. But yes, it is very, very common if you go to schools and work with kids. There are very few children. My perspective is that there are very few children who are not experiencing violence very, very directly. And everybody's concerned about it. And often you hear people say they're going to make it a priority crime and things like that. But what happens then? What does it mean if you say it's a priority crime? Does it mean it's a new category on a form with a box that you tick, or is there actually action being taken? That is unfortunately the question that I would think many people ask. But yeah, if you talk to kids, you find that there are very few children who cannot witness to some kind of form of violence. Happy to say I have had experience of school kids, and there are few children who do not have experience of violence.
Kids should not be experiencing that at all. I mean, kids should just need to grow up to be kids. And when they're growing up with that type of violence, I mean, that's just horrific. And what we're hearing is the rape rates that are going down there are amongst the women, but it's really amongst kids. I mean, kids are just being taken and younger and younger and younger being raped. Now, there was stories that a lot of people that had the AIDS disease thought that they if they raped a virgin that it would all of a sudden cure AIDS.
Yeah, that is very, very prevalent, unfortunately.
So is that still prevalent down there?
It's difficult to say how prevalent it is, but if you talk to people, yes, there is a perception. I think it started out with the idea, that if you have sex with someone who's a virgin, then that person at least can't have a sexually transmitted disease. But unfortunately, it says nothing about the person now committing the act. And so yeah, it is unfortunately fairly prevalent. At least the people I talk to, it's clear that amongst them that it is prevalent.
That's just sad that's prevalent, because then you're getting younger and younger kids are falling victim to rape. I mean, we're hearing stories as young as 8, 9 years old are falling victims of rape violence down there. And to have 9,000 plus in just a 3-month span, I mean, that's 30,000 plus a year that is happening down there. Now we're hearing those type of numbers happening again in England and France and Germany, but that's mostly due to the Muslim population that's moving in that just have a completely different set of standards. I mean, in the Muslim world, women just don't have any rights, period. You're considered property. You're a dog, you're a horse. It's just the way they consider women. So, I mean, they're having that massive increase in rape victims within those European nations. Spain is one of those. I did a video just 2 weeks ago about they created this anti-rape underwear that women are now buying like crazy. That literally just locks onto the woman, and it's anti-cut, anti-tear, anti-get into, essentially, that's trying to prevent some of that. But that's really sad when they have to create underwear that prevents rape versus just eliminate the violence itself. Yes. Now, down there in South Africa, you don't necessarily, not yet anyway, have this massive influx of Muslims within the country. I mean, you do have a large population down there, but it's not as extensive as it is up in Europe. So what that means is it's just the citizens of your own country that are just falling and becoming predators in this situation, where the moral standards are degrading to a point where that
something one hears often is that South Africa has lost its moral compass. So that's something that you hear said in public quite often.
Are there any big stories or anything like that happening in South Africa that have really hit the news, or kind of the scandals of the country that you know of that are kind of the big issues, the big stories right now?
That's difficult. I'll have to think. That's coming a bit quickly upon me. Obviously, something that is obviously on my mind is the safety of my own family because of the crime. And you do have the perspective that you have the feeling that you are not protected. You have the feeling that no one is coming to help you. Something that has now happened here, if you talk about a big story, the people have now done research and found that the private security industry actually has more people and more guns than the police actually does. And now you find that there are all sorts of legislation coming out to try to limit that, and also effectively then limit their ability to protect you, because you rely on private security for your protection, not really the police. And so people are frightened about that. Every now and again, there's talk in public about, do you as a person actually have a right to defend yourself if you are attacked? And it's pretty scary, those kinds of conversations. Yeah.
Well, the kind of last two questions I have for you then is, are you and your family, you guys are afraid to go out certain times of the day? Are there places you completely avoid because of that?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. No, you are, you fear for your children. I mean, my children, for example, are not safe. I feel my children are not safe to ride on a bicycle in the area. And You do hear a lot about children being kidnapped, and that is my greatest fear. You really do not go out at night unless there's some good reason for it. There are obviously areas which is high in crime, which you stay away from. But yeah, it's not safe to go out at night. It's not safe for a girl to be alone in this country.
One of the big things that happened here in the United States was this big defund the police movement, where they said police are too violent, they're arresting and putting in prison too many people. Is there anything like that happen where they're trying to defund the police or purposely not giving them the resources they need?
I don't think there's an active campaign to defund them, but during COVID, during the COVID lockdown, there were people who commented and said, one must realize the police are actually the police have now become the face of the COVID lockdown, whilst actually you find that the police are not necessarily well trained, they're not well paid. So you can imagine a policeman has a lot of emotional stress as well. So I do think, if nothing else, we now have these scandals about the police, some police being involved in crime. But on the other hand, I really do feel that the police do not get the necessary support.
All right. Well, last question for you. What's your opinion of your current president? Is he helping or hurting the country?
I think he's hurting. He often has, he obviously has a very, I think personally, he is very well spoken in public. But what he says and what he does are not always the same. So.
Well, I greatly appreciate you being on with us today. I mean, it's good to see what's happening in other countries, but also seeing how that's relevant to our country, because everything happens in steps. And Europe is really, really far down that trail of really bad things happening and woke things happening. And you guys are maybe a little bit behind Europe, and hopefully we're a long ways behind that. But we're seeing these similarities in every single country where the left is winning a lot of the public voice and is deteriorating society all over this world. So hopefully we all wake up from this. Well, Roy, glad that you were able to spend the time with us. We greatly appreciate your opinions on the matter and kind of divulging and enlightening us on what's happening down there. And hopefully we can talk to you again.
Indeed. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for the opportunity. Take care of yourself.
Thank you. So glad to have had Roy on with us. Again, he was live from South Africa. He's just right there out of Johannesburg. And again, great fear of any type of retaliation against him. So we do have to not disclose his true name and just refer to him as Roy. And obviously we've blacked out his face. But the whole point of having this discussion with Roy down in South Africa is to kind of show us here in the United States what could happen or what will happen if we do not get things under control. We're already seeing massive, massive losses of freedom within England, where they're getting arrested for simple freedom of speech issues. We're seeing that move into Canada, where now they're starting to arrest people within Canada for freedom of speech problems. We're seeing the massive spread of Sharia law and the influx of illegal immigrants coming from all over the Middle East and Africa into those nations, where the crime has accelerated in exponential numbers, the violence, the rape numbers, as well as the Sharia courts. And as we know, with the Muslim religion, for those that have not listened to this, it's you convert, you pay a tax, or you die. I mean, that's your options. And even though there's about 30% of the entire Muslim population throughout the world that want to push Sharia law openly, there's another 50% of them that are not pushing it, but would not support any other nation if they had a choice between Sharia law and the nation in which they dwelt. And so in the case of the United States, if it came down to deciding between defending the U.S. Constitution or defending Sharia law, the vast majority of them would defend Sharia law over the Constitution. We're seeing that a lot within the immigration population itself, and even people who are running for office, like Ilhan Omar and others, that are Somali first and U.S. citizens second. There's congressmen in Arizona and other parts. There's mayors in Dearborn, Michigan, and other parts of this country where they support their home countries first before they would ever support the United States. The Whatever podcast interviewed a couple people where they even came out and said, no, I'm Colombian first, or I'm some other country first before I'm a United States citizen, completely going against their oath that they submitted to even become a U.S. citizen. The biggest problem we're having right now is how many people are thinking that socialism is a solution. It is not a solution. You will see what's happening in South Africa right now, where their economy is dying, literally dying. The jobs are almost non-existent. People are becoming poorer and poorer, and that's why this violence is increasing. That's why the racism is increasing, because the government down there is pushing more and more socialism, is pushing more and more this single-party state, this absolute control. But when that happens, more and more problems arise. People become poor, they can't eat, they can't work, the living expenses become more expensive. And as much as they try to vote in more free stuff, the money is simply just not there to spread around anymore because people are just not working anymore. And that's why they are going against the white population, because the white population are more employed than the black population. And because they're more employed, or because they have more of an entrepreneur type of a spirit, they become the problem. And the government finds a group of people to point out that they're the problem. They're the ones that created this. Just like Hitler did with the Jews, the white population, which is the minority down in South Africa, have become the party or the group of people that are now being blamed for the poverty, for the lack of work, for the lack of jobs, for the lack of money that's going on in that country. People refuse to point at the government's the problem. Socialism is the problem. The single-party state is the problem. This entitlement mentality is the problem. They refuse to recognize the problems for what they are, and then they find a group of people to blame. That group of people during World War II ended up with 6 million Jews being slaughtered by the Nazis. And we're seeing this throughout the world, where now we have this white privilege garbage that is spreading out there. And we're having even anti-Semitism spreading once again throughout the world with this river to the sea crap, and that anything and everything is to blame but you yourself. It is not the left, it's not the Democrat policies, it's not the socialistic policies, it's not the dependence on the government with all these social assistance programs, which completely debilitates entire populaces within the United States, whether it's a black population, whether it's illegal or Latin American population, whatever it is that they want to suppress, they are purposely suppressing it because they want control. They want the voter bloc. They want that single-party state. That's always been the goal. And it's time for the U.S. to wake up to this. We are seeing it pervasively throughout Europe and now in South Africa, where the European economy is dramatically being debilitated. As we pointed out in our last podcast, Georgia, the state of Georgia within the United States, is now more wealthy than any single country within Europe. It has a greater gross domestic product than England or any of these other countries over there, because that's how debilitated their economies have become, because they turn more and more towards socialism. At one point back in the 80s, they were all turning away from socialism. And now they're turning back towards it again, and it's debilitating their economies, it's debilitating their people, and they're becoming more and more poor. And the government is usurping more and more controls. As you can see with freedom of speech, it's almost gone in England. And it's because of how much power has been given to the government. That's why socialism is evil. That's why big government is evil. That's why those of us who are conservative are constantly trying to make the federal government smaller and smaller. That's why we support President Trump so much, because he is purposely trying to make the government smaller and smaller and put Americans first. Even though the left wants to blame him for being this dictator because he's out there arresting illegal immigrants, because ICE agents and Border Patrol agents are out there just rounding up all these illegal immigrants and deporting them. They want to paint a picture that that is the military taking control of our streets. Just because he wants to put military in the streets and control crime does not mean that he's controlling any of your freedoms. We are all still free to say whatever it is we want to say. We all still have freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. None of that is being diminished. But he is trying to protect Americans by controlling the crime on the streets, by making the federal government smaller. It's one of the main reasons why he's trying to get rid of the Department of Education and send that back to the states. Just like Roe v. Wade was overturned and the authority of abortion was sent back to the states, that is not being a dictator. That is not using the military against U.S. citizens. He is not arresting U.S. citizens. He is arresting illegals and deporting them. And if you are a U.S. citizen being arrested, it's because you are acting out against police, you're hitting police, you're striking police, because that is another major issue, is the lack of respect for authority. It's a lack of respect for just common decency and common laws that keep us a community, keep us a well-defined country, where theft is up and a lot of people don't even think it's bad. It's people are assaulting homes and being shot and killed, and people are like, they were only just stealing stuff. Why did you have to kill them? It's just where good has become evil and evil has become good, and people are just don't recognize crime for what it is. Yet we look at Washington, D.C., and we see how much the crime has gone down in Washington, D.C. due to the National Guard being in the streets and just showing a presence. Just the presence of alone has diminished. The grand theft, the auto has gone down by over 50%. The murder rate has gone down by well over 50% just within the last few months, to the point that the Democrat mayor in Washington, D.C. has had to come out publicly and state, no, it is working. We have a great decrease in crime. And the mayor has actually thanked Trump publicly. A Democrat mayor has thanked him publicly. And yet we still have problems in Seattle, problems in Chicago, where they're refusing to accept that type of help because they want the problem. They want the crime. They want the illegal immigrants. Why? Because as we've said from the beginning, it's all about power and control. The more crime, the more control that I have, the more I can bring in a voter base and keep me in office, comes down to that power and control. That's all there is to it, is power and control. They want the single-party state. They want socialism. We cannot state that enough. Look what's happening in South Africa, which is why we brought him on from South Africa, where that is actually happening. They went socialist, and now the businesses are diminishing. The businesses have moved out. The economy is suffering. People are now having problems just eating and living. So now they've attacking the white farmers who are supplying their food and saying, no, you're the problem, even though that's going to make it worse. It's not about the fact that you're providing the food or anything like that. It's the symbol that a white person owns the land, and we don't want white people owning any land. So they've created a problem. They've created a victim mentality amongst the black population and pointed into a direction that's going to cause more harm and not solve the problem. Pointed in a direction where that direction is anything but the government. Yet it's the government that is the problem. It is socialism that is a problem. It is the single-party state that is the problem. It's creating so many government overreach that it suppresses entrepreneurship, it suppresses capitalism, it suppresses a free market, it suppresses freedom of speech, and creates the environment that they now live in down there, to where they are literally afraid to go out in the streets at night. Women can't go anywhere by themselves, afraid of getting raped, just like is happening in England and in France and in Germany and Spain right now, where it is definitive that women cannot go out day or night by themselves or they will get raped. That type of violence should not be happening. But also that type of violence completely destroys the fabric of the country. And once they completely destroy the fabric of the country, they can rebuild it under that dictatorship, under that socialistic dictatorship where they have absolute control. They're almost at that point in South Africa. They're on the verge. We're seeing that starting to happen within Europe, but the fear in Europe is not necessarily socialism taking over, which right now it is, but it's Sharia law taking over and them going completely on the Sharia law side and just destroying everything that they hold dear over there. Here in the United States, it's both. It's Sharia law spreading and people pushing for socialism and not even understanding what socialism even is. In my own comment section, I'm getting people saying, well, bank bailouts and business bailouts are socialism, that Medicare and SNAP benefits, that's all socialism. Those are all social programs that are leading socialistic, but that is not socialism. You've got to study what socialism is, because that is not it. Bailouts were wrong. The banks should have never been bailed out. Businesses should not be bailing out. But that is not socialism. That is not what you're voting in when you vote for socialists like Mamdani, where it is free stuff for all, where they literally start redistributing wealth and deciding at the government level which businesses succeed and which ones don't, which is what happens when they start putting in so many regulations that it controls all the businesses out there. It's when big businesses can now donate to certain politicians and get the priority and lobby out all their competition, where the competition just stops existing and monopolies start arising and we stop enforcing our monopoly laws. That eventually turns into complete socialism, where it's single-party state, absolute control. They dict out which businesses survive and which ones don't, where the money goes, because all the money is getting taken from the populace and distributed how these government officials deem fit. There's no more freedom there. There's no more elections there. It's no more freedom of speech. Crime becomes absolutely prevalent because they don't care about suppressing the crime. They don't care about the people anymore. Why? Because we're in power. We're going to stay in power. What are you going to do about it? There's nothing you can do about it, which is what's happening in South Africa. Because they're in power and they're going to stay in power and they can't get them out of power, the politicians no longer have any incentive to help or protect the people. It doesn't matter anymore. Why spend the money on when I can keep the money and put it into my other socialistic programs or my other LGBTQ programs, whatever it is that they want to put into power or put into place. Those become the priority and not the protection of the people. Not your safety, not your well-being, not the food on your table, not the home you live in. None of that becomes a priority anymore because they don't care anymore. They're in power and they're going to stay in power. That's the dangerous road we're going down. We will be the next South Africa. We will be the next Europe if we keep voting in socialism like Mamdani or what's happening in Chicago or in California or in Seattle. We've got to fight against this. And in the same time we're fighting against socialism, we have to fight against the spread of Sharia law. It cannot exist. It cannot exist anywhere within this country. Nowhere. Period. You have the freedom of religion, so you can believe in the Muslim religion, but we've got to limit it to Sharia law cannot exist. That could not survive. We're going to have Richard Marcosian on next week from Utah Stories, and we're going to discuss BlackRock, Vanguard, the whole housing market and the problems there. So it's going to be quite the conversation. Border Patrol has promised to get us on schedule and get those flights purchased, because they're going to be flying up from Texas to visit us here in person, which is good because we offer to do it remotely, but obviously in person is always better, and they've committed to doing that, so they're going to commit to figuring out how to get up here for us. And then as well as ICE is getting on our schedule, and then hopefully Representative Kennedy as well as Senator Mike Lee is also working on getting onto our schedule. But we're going to continue to provide great content and a lot of information for our listeners. So again, please become the listener, not just the subscriber. This is God and Country. We appreciate your support. So again, like, subscribe, share it. Help us get past the YouTube conservative politics suppression and get us out there. And we will see everybody on the next video.